silence and Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Items of interest, recognition and inquiry, Board of Education members. Anybody have anything? I do, yes. Mrs. Stewart.
First of all, I want to thank, where did he go? Oh, there he is. I want to thank Kirk for taking time out of his busy schedule to show me around the district and all the facilities. I really appreciated it, and we're lucky to have Kirk in our district. I want to thank Suzanne and her crew at Marine City High School for helping us out. But Jeannie Frank, about a year ago, started a gently used store at Marine City High. And Amy and Jeannie and Suzanne and myself, we've been over working and cleaning it up and getting it ready for Mariner Day, which is on August 27th. So I want to thank those people for doing that, and the custodians for helping out also. So, and the cheerleaders. The cheerleaders were a huge help, and absolutely, as was their coach, Jen Fergatto. So thank you.
We having a grand opening?
Well, Mariner Day is going to be the grand reopening.
Okay.
Yep.
Fantastic. Mr. Richley.
Just to reiterate something Mrs. Bubuck said, I want to thank Kirk for taking me around the St. Clair Middle School, and I look forward to going through more areas in the district. And also, I believe it was last Thursday, the Special Needs Transportation Expo was held here in East China. It's a statewide thing, and a big thank you goes out to Michelle Metapennigan and many other people that were involved in that. Always awesome to see all the people that come around the state to learn how to deal with special needs and transportation. It's pretty neat, so thank you.
Dr. Skolko.
The calendar turned to August. Everyone's back to work, and we are frantically preparing for everyone to come September 8th when classes start, so we look forward to that.
Look at Dawn's look. I'm looking at Dawn. That's what I was whispering in the microphone, that look on Dawn's face.
Well, a little interesting times, because it does appear that the economy is on the rebound. We have several folks who are looking for have accepted other opportunities because there are other opportunities now, and so we're working to get staffed, and Ms. Demick has a large task ahead of her. So,
That brought up a question. The opening day, is there going to be an opening day event or not?
Classes start on September 8th, and teachers and board members, all employees and the board is invited to the PAC on September 3rd at 8 a.m.
Okay.
Did you say 8 o'clock, Steve?
8 a.m. Yep. No, 7:30. Sorry. Whoop, we just changed that today with the ECEA. 7:30.
7:30.
Thank you, Mrs. Demick. Catching my attention.
All right. Next item on the agenda is persons wishing to address the board. Kelly, do you have any cards? Oh. Okay. Move on. Information discussion items. Number one is waiver of tax collection interest. Tina, this is Tina Wigglers. Ms. Tina Wigglers.
Good evening, President Bewer, trustees. For over the last 20-plus years, the recommended action, the waiver of tax collection, has been presented to you at the organizational meeting. And I understand that there were questions regarding this in the last agenda. And what this item is actually requesting is that you waive the interest for the tax collections while they're in the hands of the treasurers. And then the second item on that action is just notifying you of the tax collection schedule. Basically, when a treasurer collects the taxes, they deposit those money into a non-interest-bearing account that is associated with no fees, and then they disperse them back to the taxing jurisdictions within a 2-week period. So normally they don't collect any interest and they don't pay any fees associated with those accounts. So it has been a routine practice of ours to just accept and waive the collection of taxes and disperse them to us.
Questions?
I've got a hypothetical question.
Sure.
If interest rates weren't what they are today, I'm looking to the future, someday in the future, they're something reasonable with significant figures left of the decimal place. Does the amount of cash flow in the time period that we're talking about, does it make any sense to ever revisit this?
Well, I think it's something we should revisit possibly in the future, but I would like you to understand the complexity that can be encompassed around collecting taxes. Taxpayers pay at different time frames within that period. So treasurers would have to calculate the interest by day, by taxing jurisdictions, and then they would also have to account for non-sufficient funds and returns, which can be very timely. But back in 1994, there probably was higher interest rates, but they still were choosing to utilize a non-interest-bearing account just to make their practice simple.
Thank you.
Okay?
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is our facility study, continuing.
A couple slides, very short, 6 slides to present to you tonight. We had ongoing conversation this past week, and the direction from those conversations is for our consultants, Barton Mallow, to bring back to you, again, a refined proposal. They got that, since we met on Tuesday and Wednesday of last week, they got that direction Thursday morning, and they will have that for you at your meeting 2 weeks from tonight, your regular meeting, which further refines, hopefully to the point to which that you feel comfortable, and that's the directions that was given to them. But in the meantime, I'd just like to share some information that I'm sure that board members are aware of, but it's always good to remind folks of, especially those maybe watching tonight, that we have different funds, and different funds can be used for different purposes. The general fund is our primary operating fund. We receive monies through the general fund through the 6 mil homestead, the 18 mil non-homestead, that's paid locally by our taxpayers here in the school district, but it's paid to the state for redistribution based on the per pupil foundation grant. These monies can be used for nearly any purpose, if not any purpose, and the district has spent its has deficit spent its general fund in 11 of the past 12 school years, and that's part of the discussion that we've been having now over the last several months as to how to get to a point to get the general fund in the black, so that annually we are maybe adding a little to fund balance rather than spending from fund balance. So again, general fund paid basically on your homestead, paid to the state, redistributed. The sinking fund is 0.4 mils paid locally, but all that money is retained within the district. It is not paid to the state for redistribution. It's paid here, and it is retained here, and it is approved through 2022. The sinking fund, though, can only be used for capital expense only. Facility repair and renovation cannot be used for salaries, benefits, paying of utility bills, or other operating expenditures. And as we talked a little bit before, if we were to pursue a ballot proposal, let's use $49 million, the sinking fund generates approximately $650,000, and so it would take us 75.3 years to generate that $49 million. Time that, as you see by some of the pictures that I show with these accompanying slides, we do not have.
Steve, can I just say something regarding the sinking fund? 'Cause
Absolutely.
I heard this, or we talked about it, about having a line item in our budget that said capital expenditure outlay. We used to have one of those, and I believe, don't quote me, because I'm not 100% sure, that the sinking fund then took the place of that line item in our budget. I know, Tina, that was well before your time, but there just didn't seem to be enough money that the district could set aside for, capital outlay or whatever you want to call it. So we went to the sinking fund because I know each school would get together and do their big ticket items, and then they would go to central office and they'd prioritize them.
Right.
But our problem was that if a heating system went down at a building, they're wiped out the whole capital outlay for the entire district. So I think we make good use of that sinking fund.
We not only make good use, it's part of why I want to speak to these funds here tonight, is because, again, general fund, in lieu of a sinking fund, you would be taking any repairs out of the general fund. But as the strains on the general fund became more and more as healthcare, and you started dipping into deficit, that's when you pursued the first sinking fund.
Right.
And at that point in time, obviously in a prior administration, the decision was made with the sinking fund to nearly, if not zero out, a general fund line item for maintenance.
Right.
That's not good practice. You want to supplement a general fund maintenance line item with a sinking fund. You don't necessarily have to make that general fund maintenance line item as large with a sinking fund as you may have had in the past, but you do not want to zero it out to the point where you can't also do some regular maintenance, preventative maintenance. A sinking fund isn't about preventative maintenance. A sinking fund is about, as we talk about here again, repair, renovation, so that you want your general fund line item for maintenance to be the fund that keeps things up to date, not up to date necessarily, but it's that preventative maintenance stuff so that things don't go into disrepair, because once they're in disrepair, you have to get to the sinking fund. So.
Well, and the other thing too, you don't want to get dependent on that, because it might not always be there. And
Well,
it's
it has to be renewed. Again, you're right. You're absolutely right. You know, we'll have to go back and consider, this board will have to, or maybe different members on this board in 2022, will have to consider whether or not to ask whether or not to renew. Okay. And the third area of funding is bond funding. And right now, for this upcoming school year, we have 3.04 mils of bonded indebtedness. This also is paid locally. All this money stays local. This is not paid to the state and redistributed to us. It is paid locally. In 4 years, that bonded indebtedness will be under 2, and in 6 years, it will be under 1. In this particular case, you have even less discretion than you had in the previous 2. General fund, you have almost unlimited discretion. Sinking fund, you have a little bit more discretion, but it has to be in consistent with repair or renovation replacement. Here, it can only be used for the stated purpose on the approved ballot. So, for example, most recently, we have the community. We very much appreciate the passing of the bus bond, but in that, those dollars then can only be for the purchase of buses. We cannot divert them for a boiler or some other funds. And again, they cannot be used for salaries, benefits, utility costs, or any other operating expenses. So it's always good, because I know without folks understanding that monies are often specifically tied to specific, legally tied to specific uses, it can get confusing. For example, we replaced the turf at the stadium, and a lot of folks have said, how can you do that when you're in a deficit situation? Well, those monies are not operating funds monies. Those are sinking fund monies that are used specifically and correctly for safety and replacement of our facilities like the stadium facility. Okay? So I want to talk to the fact that improving students' experiences while reducing operating costs. This is why you are considering a facility proposal for a ballot proposal. We want that the need is indeed real. Infrastructure is failing. Mr. Grzelka shared with us last month some very stark pictures, some of which I borrowed tonight, and many of you have spoken about with respect to the tours. Infrastructure is failing. It's inefficient. They are old, and they are using much more gas and electric than they need to use. If we were in our homes, we'd be updating our furnace. We'd be updating our to higher efficiency light bulbs and all of those kind of things. Outdated, and in many instances, replacement parts are no longer available. Also, we know that the systems are integrated, and failure of one jeopardizes others. And the video that Mr. Headley shared with us in technology to explain what's happening there speaks to that, because as rooftop air conditioning units fail, it's not just the climate of the building and the temperature of the building, but it's also that it also is cooling the server rooms. And if the servers overheat, they shut down, they can fail, and then all instruction kind of is grinding to a halt as our instructional technology would no longer be used. Bond money, I want to reinforce that bond money stays in the district and can only be used for the stated purpose. And so if our stated purpose is to update infrastructure and student safety and get current instructional technology, those would be the only purposes. It would not go for salaries or for those other operating funds. And general fund relief. General fund relief is indeed necessary so that we can operate in the black. This is monies that would require fewer repair costs, calls to a bumbler, to electric to deal with our heating issues that come up, and lower utility bills. With these lower utility bills, not only does the money from the bond stay here in the district, then the money that is paid to the state that's funneled back to us, we would see relief on that as well, and greater use on that, because the operating funds would then, we'd have greater operating leeway, greater operating opportunities. And students would benefit. I mean, in the end, that's what this truly is also about. You can't have buildings failing around them, right? And that's why I speak about improving students' experience while reducing operating costs. Our current instructional technology, though we were blessed in 2009 to have the support of the community, we've said before, it's now going on 7 years old, right? And just the amount of the amount of technology changes and the upgrades that have occurred, our students aren't working with the newest and best technologies right now. Safer facilities, of course, and reliable, comfortable, and consistent learning environments. So I make the case that way. A month or so ago, back in June, 2 months ago, we presented this slide to you as part of an initial thoughts with the Barton Malice study. The initial study came in to do not only all that was recommended, but all that was also wanted, so needs and wants. We were talking about roughly $60 million, and we talked about what that would mean taxing-wise. And of course, our current bond indebtedness is right there. We see how it will fall off here in 2019-20, which really is only 4 years away, right? It'll fall a mill, and then 2 years later, it'll fall, and then it will expire. The average for a 20-year millage to raise $60 million, 1.75 initially, 2.63 over the life of the bond. And what this graph showed was that here in 26, 27, we would get to a point where our millage is less than what we're currently paying. So an initial increase, but eventually not more than halfway through this, we'd be right back to where we are currently right now in terms of our taxes for bonded indebtedness. And also, using just year one as an example, a $100,000 home, taxable value 1/2, is a $7.29 increase. And that is, again, on a $100,000 home, moving from 3.04 to 479, that 175 increase. You have talked over the last month and a half, both in small group sessions and here with each other, with myself and with the Barton Mallow team, to keep working at reducing this proposal in a fashion that indeed improves student experiences while reducing operating costs and provides a smaller burden to our taxpayers. And so I provide you one other slide that we had made up with the help of our bond finance group, the group that led us through the previous bus bond, estimates on what a $49 million bond would be. The exact same current through 2023-24 is there. All right. Now the initial is 1.45 rather than 175, so a drop of 0.3 of a mil. The average drops a 0.5 mil from 263 to 212 to generate that $49 million. You can see that the time at which we are now under where we were, where we currently are, 3.04, is right here now in 21-22, as opposed to 5 years earlier, we would be right where we are now. Okay, that's reflected in this graph. So if I kind of went back and forth jumping, you could see how that moves. It's about the best I can do for animation, guys. Okay.
The two axes stay the same, so that not
Yes.
only does the curve shift, but it does change shape just a little bit.
It does, absolutely. The axes are the same. Yes, absolutely. And again, I give you the cost in year one for the $100,000 home with a $50,000 taxable value, $6.04. It would drop $1.25 roughly per month. That's all I have for you tonight in terms of this. It kind of just, I wanted to again make help the community understand how monies are set aside legally for different purposes, how the work that you are doing is aimed at improving students' experiences while trying to reduce the burden on the operating budget so that you are in a consistent positive annual budget figure. And then again say, in the end, the need is real and students benefit. Can't get away from that. Yes?
Can you also talk to, so if we did go for a bond and it was approved, how some of these projects would go out for bid, how the money would be spent?
Every single project, every piece of equipment, every construction has to be bid. It would be bid, and all of those would come before this board. So, for example, if we were doing rooftop units at any of the buildings, they would be spec'd. Specifications would be put out. They would be bid, and then you would get a bid tabulation sheet, just like you got for the buses, just like you got for the turf, and you would have to make those approvals. Construction is the same. So would the eventual construction management as well as architectural firms. Those would all be bid and approved by the board. Does that help, or did you want more?
No, that helps, but then part two of that is, let's say, in our proposal, a certain item costs X amount of dollars, but after we go for bids, it comes in, substantially lower. What happens to the difference in those funds?
we bid for a specific amount of money, not for projects. So just like we said before with the buses, we would be bidding for a certain amount of millage
Bonding
and
or
money.
bond?
Bonding, I'm sorry. We'd be bonding for a certain amount of millage and dollars. And therefore, if some bids came in under, additional projects could be done. And so what often happens in these situations is that you would have contingency plans of other projects that you thought needed to be done, but would only be done in the event that bids came in lower. And at the same time, you would also have to identify some projects that would be first to go if bids came in higher.
So is that going to be part of everything that we'll be looking at?
It is, it would be. But I would say that if you will take a look at projects in its most global sense, not necessarily very nitty-gritty stuff, but absolutely everything that you would need to know and anything you'd want to ask, we would want to respond to.
But we would have a good idea.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think what you have in front of you right now presents a lot of those
Right.
projects.
I just want to make sure
Yep.
that the public understands the
Oh, sure.
process and how money is distributed and.
Sure, absolutely.
We'd be taking this proposal that we've been tweaking and looking at and crossing off and our wish lists and so forth, and would we then, pretty much per se, we come down with a budget per building or per facility? Or would it not get that?
I'll jump to Kirk and Tina too to weigh in at any time. I don't know if it would be per facility or per project, because for example, if you were going to
Right, you get a better bid if you replace 5 AC units versus 1, sort of thing.
yeah,
And then the technology would be throughout the entire
correct.
district as well, so.
I mean, there would be there is a great deal of desire to get as much consistency as possible. We've talked about that in terms of our controls, our heating and cooling controls, and those kind of things across all the buildings. Similarly, the more equipment that is consistent, the easier it is to have one vendor to deal with for parts and replacement and warranties and all those kind of things. So,
Well, I know in our safety and security, when, the wish list came out, it included, doing a lot of renovations to the buildings themselves and how the grand entrances were for each building. And I think we've all looked at that and felt that safety and security is top on our list with cameras and so forth. But how much money did we want to spend on restructuring facilities themselves to do that?
Correct.
Actually, could you take it back to the 49 million? Yeah. The question that I have, I guess you can say the $6.04 a month figure is based on the initial, not the average.
it is based on the initial. It says year one.
So that
The
I think is
highest.
kind of misleading because, I mean, in doing it by month, I mean, it's not like you pay taxes per month. It's all at once, first of all. But secondly, I do appreciate how we brought this down to 49 million from 60, but I think there's a lot more that we can bring down. But the thing that I'm wondering about is the addition to gearing the 4 classrooms, is that still included in the 49?
It is not.
Okay, and we will be getting the details on what's in this.
Again, as we talked, as I talked earlier, we had some small group meetings this past week. Those occurred Tuesday, Wednesday. We gave all of the feedback from those meetings to the consultants on Thursday morning. And so to have all those details ready for us tonight wasn't feasible, but you will have them prior to your regular board meeting 2 weeks from tonight.
Okay, and the other concern that I have, are we still including purchasing new computers and laptops and that sort of thing? And
There is new technology, both infrastructure and devices within this proposal.
okay, so what exactly was eliminated? I mean, overall, is it something like from the $60 million figure?
I won't speak off the top of my head to that, so that if I misspeak, I don't mislead the public, because again, I understand that sometimes when we say something here, it becomes, that's what we're doing. If you are, if you are willing and want to meet, I know you weren't able to meet last week, but if you're willing and want to meet any point in time this week, I'd be happy to go through that with you.
Absolutely.
And I'm not trying to keep it from the public. I just don't want to misspeak tonight, as well as I'd like to see the final Barton Mallow report based on the feedback myself as well.
We know that, you know, the addition to gearing was a chunk, and the scale back of our security for not doing infrastructure
Construction.
construction took a chunk out of it, so.
Okay. And theoretically, if we're not going to be doing the gearing addition, then we will be redistricting to bring more students towards the south end, I assume. I mean, theoretically, if we don't go with,
Beyond theoretically, I think there will have to be some measure of redistricting if a building closes and there isn't an addition to gearing.
I mean, we still need to, in my opinion, we still need to close the building. It's I mean, all the work that our committees had put into it, that was the findings. And even when we went from, you know, general fund savings to facility studies, even the small group, before we had Barton Mallow involved, that was one of the requirements they felt was, and we have from the beginning as well, that we need to close a building. And I think that in itself will trigger redistricting all at the same time. I mean, that's my thought.
right.
The reduction in, if and when a building closes, you are doing so in order to save operating expenses. And so redistricting would only be to facilitate the student population in the remaining facilities.
It would also help us to manage the staff
Correct.
to some extent.
The concern that I have, and I've shared this before, but I'm going to share it again, is that, first of all, you look at the city of Marine City, they have been talking about raising taxes. The city of St. Clair's been talking about raising taxes. The county is actually now talking about bringing up a new, or not an operating millage, but another millage. And now we're talking about bringing another millage, and so, or bond. But the concern that I have is quite simple, that over the last decade, people have been moving more and more into poverty. They can't afford different things, and I think that this is a concern, and many people have shared this concern with me. So that's my belief, and I believe that once the tax rates go down, which would be what, in 2019 and 20, we can just think about this. That's what, 0.93 or whatever it would be of a decrease. So you do 0.4 of a sinking fund increase. That's $6.5 million per year that you would be getting from that, on top of the $650,000.
That's incorrect. You're not going to get $6.5 million by doubling the sinking fund.
It's not double. That would be 10 times the amount of the sinking fund. The sinking fund's 0.04.
Correct.
And 0.4, doing a 0.4 increase would be 10 times, and plus that would be...
It's not 0.04, it's 0.4. So you're talking about the same amount.
That's not what's on my... I have a different thing, which...
That's what I was given today, and that's what I believe it to be. It's 0.4, it's 0.4 of a mil.
Mr. Buer?
Yes.
I thank you, Dr. Skolka, to you and the entire team that's done the work on getting us to where we are. There's a lot more work to do on the facility studies and to improve the student learning experience. I think it's a bit off topic, but jumping to countywide poverty levels, but I think one of the greatest tools we have to influence county poverty rates is education. And as we spend money on education, I think that's improving our future economic outlook. And so, as we look at the proposals from Barton Mallow, first the one that came out in June, and then the one that came out just prior to our last regular board meeting on the 27th of July, some things are starting to become very clear, and as we talked about, closing an elementary. And while I don't want to get wrapped up in details as we go along, I think that the parts that become obvious, if we can knock them, if we can make decisions and put them behind us, I think it'll help the entire process. So with that being said, I'd like to make a motion to close Eddy Elementary and redistrict to the extent necessary to maximize student programming and accommodate students in our existing facilities for the 2016-17 school year. Programming and redistricting plan work shall then be reported to the board on regular intervals leading up to the approval and implementation of the plan.
We have a motion.
Support.
Support Mrs.
Mrs. Frank.
Mrs. Frank. Comments, questions? We are open for comments. Yes.
Well, first of all, this wasn't on the agenda, so it's kind of, I mean, it's not exactly, it's not a shocking revelation because it's kind of coming to this, but I think to do this at a special meeting where there's nobody here, I think is pretty.
That's why we're in here doing it.
This is a televised
So you
meeting.
knew that
For
you're going to be
television.
doing this at
Well,
this?
it's a part of facility studies. We've been talking about this for months,
Years.
years.
Well, I find a problem with that, to do it at a special meeting and not to, I find it misleading, but
Well, special
How is it
meetings are,
misleading?
special meetings are advertised. It is televised. They're advertised as to when they are, and
I mean, I would suggest
been doing-
postponing it to next Monday because that's,
No.
we don't have a meeting next Monday.
Well, there's
or
a
the
mo-
Monday after, whatever the regular
Um,
meeting is.
as the
There is
as
a
it being
motion on
my
the table.
as it being my motion, I'm not willing to entertain postponing the motion at this point.
Okay.
Comments from anybody?
I guess I've got a question to the not to the timing, but to the content. Mr. Ritchley, do you have any concerns that you could share with us?
Yeah, I do have concerns, and it's that, you know, without details, we see what happens when you make a motion without details. And then, you know, with Gearing Elementary, we voted to close it without any details, without any
I do not.
information. Now,
I do not believe we did vote to close Gearing. Gearing,
well, we
as far
voted to
as I
close an
know, is still
elementary school,
open.
and then it, so.
When was that? That was almost
March.
1
Or
year.
no,
That was almost
October of
1
last year.
year ago.
Right.
We've done a lot of work in the past 9 months, or
It
10
was-
months.
I think it was even earlier than October.
yeah, I
Might
think it
be.
was. I think it was September that Mr. McNamee made that motion, but I could.
No,
that's
it's
And
just-
just to
also, what
close an
happens
elementary
if the bond doesn't pass? That's another
This-
question. Is that could change the Eddy versus Gearing
Nah.
debate.
Well, that's what we're discussing.
But what we're voting on now is on the assumption that it's going to pass.
No,
No,
there are no. I'm not making that
That's my
assumption.
understanding.
I'm not
Before-
making that assumption.
Before we ever thought about a bond, we had voted to close a school.
This.
And throughout the studies, with our own group and then with Barton Mallow, it just comes clear and apparent that we have to follow through on that in order to cut our existing expenditures out of our general fund and to save money
Not
towards the bottom line.
not to beat a dead horse, but what we've been talking about, what brought this up in the very beginning is that our budget, we've been running at a deficit for some time. Look at the big things that are causing deficit, and the fact of the matter is causing the deficit is declining enrollment, and with declining enrollment, that causes excess classroom capacity, which is where we are.
I would just suggest that we do this at a regular meeting when it's on the agenda, but that's just my view, so.
Ellen, I have a question for you. I guess I'm kind of confused as to what difference would it make if we did it tonight or we did it at a regular meeting?
Well,
Because they're both televised. I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, that's okay. But the issue is, number one, apparently some people had knowledge of this before the meeting.
Well, we talked about it in our small group meetings last week when we met in our little groups.
Well, then why wasn't it put on the
For 2
agenda?
years,
Well, I mean,
It
that's
is
not
under
your-
the facilities. We considered it would be all.
But it wasn't going to be, this is not an action item. The only action item is on the property taxes. So to me, that's a concern that we make a habit of doing these sorts of things at special meetings. And that's a concern of mine, so.
I mean, note taken, special meetings are advertised, published, that they're going to be held, and they are televised. So
But when things happen at a special meeting that's not on the agenda,
motions are open at any time on the floor, and we've
but-
done that in the past many times, so I don't.
And these are, when motions are made, when parliamentary process is followed, when we discuss, it's the 7 board members who are all present here tonight that make those decisions through discussion, sharing ideas, and we're all here. I'm just at a loss as to what day of the week it is.
Well, that's not the issue. The issue is doing things at a special meeting when nobody is expecting action on an item, and we do that. That's the problem.
We've never discussed overcapacity and budget concerns prior to this meeting.
We also never discussed closing Eddy Elementary.
You said also never discussed, so you say we never discussed budget deficits or overcapacity?
Well, sure we have, but not.
For how long?
For a while. But the issue here is whether or not to close Eddy Elementary, and I think it deserves more scrutiny, and I believe that it deserves more research before doing that.
I think the research showed us on that restructuring committee and then the closure committee that we were closing the wrong building. And I think that the people I've talked to out in the community and administrators, that basically we need to make the motion and make it official that we are closing Eddy Elementary. It's been discussed or talked about for 5 or 6 months, and closing a school's been discussed since before I got on this board. So I don't see what the problem is.
My issue isn't with closing a school. It's with not having the details. And the other thing that I see as an issue is we expected the Gearing Elementary costs to go down with the new boiler system put in. And so if that doesn't happen, I think that's something we need to consider. But that's just my thoughts, so.
Okay, say that again. I'm confused.
Well, we've been talking about this for well over a year in closing the building in order to help balance our own budget, long before we ever started talking about a bond issue. The committee itself, within our own committee, has shown us that Gearing was the wrong building. Eddy was the one that needed to be closed, and bringing Barton Malo in, their study shows us the same thing. So I don't know how much more studying you want to do on it. It's time to take action, in my opinion.
And that study which we've had for months and months. It's contained in this binder. And if I recall, when all of Barton Mallow's team sat up in front of us, there was well in excess of 100 years' experience that have been doing this sort of study. And I personally think that's sufficient.
Motion on table has been supported,
If you want to read it, it's there and then there.
been read.
Okay.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
So moved. Mr. Richley is our dissenting vote.
President Biewer, Ralph Schlosser of Barton Mallow
I just saw him walk in.
has walked in, and
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
and so before, no, I think we miscommunicated in terms of a 6 o'clock versus a 7 o'clock start, so I apologize. What I do want to do is provide you the opportunity to ask him any of the questions that you might have from our earlier discussion, if you do, or if not, that's okay too.
Yes, please. One of the things that we've talked about, we've been trying to take this 60 million, 52 million, trying to get it down farther and farther. One of the questions Mr. Richley asked, was there any particular large-scale item that caused us to be able to get down to that 49 million? We spoke about two of the big things we thought was the taking away the gearing addition, and then also the new construction for the security, like reconstructing all the entranceways and the doorways and so forth.
Correct. I've incorporated, I think, most of the comments that the board has brought up over the last couple of weeks, months, whatever. Right now, deleting the gear addition, deleting the additions for the security entrances, and go with a intercom security camera kind of approach at all the buildings. Those kinds of things, deleting some of the miscellaneous architectural items, curtains and things like that. Right now, the total scope of work, and this is just something I've run today, so you haven't seen this. Right now, priority 1 items are at $49.8 million. The priority 2 is $13.8 million. So the total is 63.5, but the priority 1 items right now, per this list, which you'll get, is 49.8 million.
Okay.
So I think, you know, the suggestions that have been brought up, I've incorporated, and I think, you know, we're very close. Obviously, you need to look at what is priority 1 on this list to make sure it still is in line with what your thoughts are. But I think we're honing in on, you know, what the target is for the board.
So taking into consideration Mrs. Frank's comment earlier, which I'll repeat, that if we go out to bid and we come up with some items that, you know, are bid under bid, and so we have funds left, then we could then kind of highlight what priority 2 items we think
Exactly.
would be on our wish list to do.
Right.
Vice versa, the same thing. If we're overbid, we know that something's got to give.
Correct.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of different kinds of items: mechanical system, electrical systems, technology, site work. Obviously, the marketplace in the scope of work is going to determine what the final prices are, but I think the budgets are appropriate for the scope of work intended.
Okay.
But there's always flexibility to add at one place, subtract, whatever. So there's flexibility in the budgets as the bond issue develops.
Okay.
And the actual implementation develops as well.
When will we see that list?
Watch this.
Right there?
Thank you.
It's still wet.
Thank you.
And since there's only one, I will get it to you tomorrow.
We'll see you tomorrow.
I can send you email copy as well.
If you send it as a PDF, I'll either PDF it or if you
Yeah.
could, either way.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Raul?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Skauka.
Sir.
So when are we going to be voting on this? Approximately.
In order to get everything in place for a March 2016 election, the board would have to act either 2 weeks, or I would recommend a special meeting shortly thereafter. I do not believe that we could wait until the September regular meeting and still meet all of the legal hurdles that have to be jumped in order to get something on the ballot. So as I get everything out to folks, hopefully you'll have a really good opportunity to review it. Good discussion next 2 weeks at the regular meeting, excuse me, at our next meeting. And then you can choose at that point in time to move that, or to move to have a special meeting.
Dr. Skolka, do you,
Yes.
at this point, do you see any, do you know of any obstacles that'll prevent us from getting to the point we want to be in 2 weeks? Of course, you don't know the unforeseen, but
No,
can we target that?
I think it would probably be wise, given Trustee Richley's earlier concern, to put an action item on the agenda for 2 weeks from tonight at the regular meeting, to which you can either choose to table or to act on.
I think that'd be a good idea.
Mhm.
And after we receive a copy of that, if
Mhm.
needed, could we do small groups again?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. In fact, if you want to wait afterwards, we'll run it through the copier tonight for you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else on facility study?
So there's no way of not going to a bond in the view of administration?
It will be my recommendation that we put something before the voters. Two things from that point. First, this board could choose not to accept that recommendation and not put something in front of the voters. Or we would put something in front of the voters, and as was described in the Times Herald, we trust them to make the decision that is part of their democratic process.
And I just want to say one thing to that, is that people do have the opportunity to get petition signatures for a ballot initiative for a bond or a millage.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's an option for voters too. If you want your taxes raised by whatever percent, then that's an option that they have. So,
I will again continue to make the case that this is the best course of action for the reasons earlier. We have to provide our students facilities in which they can learn, and learn safely, and learn warm and dry.
And cool.
And cool, absolutely. And we're struggling right now with current infrastructure.
if I may, I do have a presentation that I would like to make at the next meeting, even if it's from right here or whatever. I just want to offer an alternative plan that doesn't include a tax increase. So I will be presenting that. I mean, not
Would-
PowerPoint, but
I understand. Would you be willing to meet with me to review that, to fact check it before we
Yes.
present it that night?
yep.
Thank you.
Item 5, board action agenda item. The administration is recommending that for the 2015-16 fiscal year, the board shall not require payment of interest earned on taxes collected on behalf of the school district by the various municipal units in the district, provided such taxes collected are remitted on the following schedule: Detroit Edison property taxes remitted upon receipt, all other property taxes remitted biweekly. Motion is needed.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. So moved and carried. Item 6, items for the next board meeting is the summer school report. That is ending this week?
Yes. Secondary has come to a close. Elementary has one more week.
Okay.
And Mrs. Woolman will give you the full breakdown of participation and things like that.
Speaking of just ending summer, speaking of the, just a quick question, how did our summer food program?
We got an update from Julie Humphreys today. They were serving in the excess of 100 a day out at East China Park. And now that summer school has started, they're doing similarly at Marine City High School, Middle School, both for the secondary and elementary students. As summer school comes to a close, the program continues, and the athletes who have just started practice today and others who will start Wednesday are eligible to participate. And again, we encourage anyone of school age, they can come down and eat. That you don't have to be involved in a program, summer school, athletics, or anything else. If you want to come down, come on down.
Awesome. Right. With that, we stand adjourned.